A lot of people think the tension between Prince Edward and King Charles is down to their age gap. But what about the bond between Edward and Princess Anne? Surprisingly, Anne and Edward actually share one of the closest relationships in the royal family, despite their different ages and positions. Anne has always been incredibly caring towards her younger brother. So, what makes Edward so special to Anne? Let's take a closer look at their connection. While it's not totally clear just how close they are, Anne has always been the type of older sister who looks out for Edward. Even today, she's very much in that role. When Anne was just 14, everything changed for her with the birth of Edward. The age gap between them wasn't just about numbers, it shifted the family dynamics and shaped their relationship for years. Having already been through the royal upbringing and adolescence before Edward came along, Anne naturally took on a more mature and even slightly parental role. This dynamic was clear for everyone to see during Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee Thanksgiving service at St. Paul's Cathedral. All eyes were on Anne and Edward, who were spotted together in a way that really highlighted their sibling bond. Anne appeared as the protective older sister, while Edward, by then an adult, seemed to still look to her for guidance, especially in social situations. A good example of this was when Sophie, Countess of Wessex, and her daughter Lady Louise were chatting, and Edward was seen following Anne's lead. The difference in their personalities was striking. Anne's serious, almost commanding vibe compared to Edward's cheeky, playful grin really showed how their sibling relationship had remained strong, even as adults. It was clear that their age gap, along with Anne's early role in the family, still had a big influence on how they interacted with each other. The bond between Anne and Edward wasn't just something you saw when they were out in public, it also played a big part in their private lives, especially during tough family moments. After the passing of their mother, Queen Elizabeth II, their sibling connection took on even more importance. Anne's role as a steadying force became much clearer. Despite her own deep sadness, Anne did her best to channel the strength and stability their parents had shown, trying to keep things together for her siblings. Body language expert Judy James pointed out that Anne's way of handling grief was very different from that of her brother Edward and other family members. While they were more open about their emotions, Anne kept her feelings in check, adopting a stiff upper lip approach, a classic British attitude in tough times. It was a side of Anne that really stood out, showing how she'd always carried herself in public. When it came to supporting their brother Andrew through a difficult period, Anne and Edward stood by him, despite the royal family's often complicated relationships. Andrew, whose reputation had been severely tarnished by his connection to the late convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein, was at the center of a scandal. After a legal case with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, Andrew has largely stepped away from the public eye, and King Charles has been clear about wanting him to stay out of the spotlight. However, not everyone in the royal family agrees with this, and Anne and Edward's support for Andrew wasn't shared by everyone. Recent events have shown a spotlight on the growing tensions within the royal family, particularly when it comes to Andrew's public presence. Just 2 days before King Charles III's 74th birthday, a shooting party hosted by Princess Anne and Prince Edward became a symbol of this internal family divide. In a gesture that seemed to signal support and unity, Anne and Edward invited Andrew to join them for the event. This was a notable move because it directly contradicted King Charles's stance on Andrew's public appearances. Charles has been very clear about his desire for Andrew to stay out of the spotlight. His disapproval of Andrew's public engagements has been well documented, with Charles believing that keeping Andrew out of the public eye would protect the monarchy's reputation and help maintain family unity. The king's approach to the situation has been to keep Andrew's appearances to a minimum, hoping this would be best for the royal family as a whole. However, Anne and Edward clearly had a different perspective. By inviting Andrew to the shooting party, they showed they were more concerned about his well-being than the public's opinion. They seemed to feel that, regardless of the negative press, their brother needed their support during such a difficult time. Their decision to include him likely reflected a more compassionate view of the situation, one that put family first. On a different note, it's also clear that Anne and Edward's relationship with Sophie, Countess of Wessex, isn't as close as one might expect. Navigating relationships with in-laws can be tricky, especially when there's a big age gap and contrasting personalities at play. And that's evident in the interactions between Princess Anne and Sophie. While there's no major conflict between them, Their dynamic lacks the warmth and closeness that might be expected from family. There have been a few moments in the public eye that have revealed subtle tensions and differences in how they relate to one another. Body language expert Judy James has given an insightful analysis of the dynamics between Princess Anne and Sophie, Countess of Wessex, revealing some interesting contrasts in how they interact with each other. One key aspect of their relationship is how their body language differs during public appearances. For example, during an outing before the COVID-19 pandemic, Sophie seemed to be actively seeking Anne's approval. Her posture was described as upright, with a keen, almost girlish attitude, while Anne appeared more reserved and distant, settling back in her seat and showing little interest in the conversation. While Sophie would flash a polite, tooth-bearing royal smile, Anne's response was much more restrained, with just a slight raising of her brows and a closed-lip expression. This difference suggests that Sophie may have been trying to meet Anne's expectations, while Anne remained more aloof and less responsive. In another instance, Sophie's characteristic giggles seemed to mildly irritate Anne. Judy James noted that Sophie's playful, almost naughty schoolgirl body language prompted a more prim and disapproving reaction from Anne. This could indicate that Anne was uncomfortable with or annoyed by Sophie's informal and playful demeanor, which sharply contrasts with Anne's more serious and composed public persona. Despite these subtle tensions, it's important to note that Anne and Edward are working closely together as advisors to the royal family. The monarchy has undergone significant changes in recent years, with shifts that have impacted both the personal and structural dynamics within the family. One of the most public changes has been Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's decision to step back from their roles as senior royals, marking a period of major transformation for the family. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle moved to California in early 2020, it marked a major shift in their roles within the royal family and opened a new chapter in their lives. This decision not only changed how the public viewed the royal family, but also had practical consequences for its structure and day-to-day functions. The royal family faced even more challenges with the death of Prince Philip in April 2021. His passing marked the end of an era for the monarchy, as he had been a key figure in supporting Queen Elizabeth II throughout her reign. His absence was deeply felt, both personally and within the institution. Then, in September 2022, the death of Queen Elizabeth II caused another monumental shift. As the longest-reigning monarch in British history, her passing ushered in the reign of her son Charles, who became King Charles III. This was not only a huge moment in terms of succession, but it also required a reassessment of the roles and responsibilities of other family members. In response to these changes, Princess Anne and Prince Edward took on new roles as official counselors to the king. This change was made official with the passing of the Councillors of State Act 2022 on December 6, 2022. The act updated the list of individuals who could step in for the monarch if the king was unavailable or incapacitated. Alongside Queen Consort Camilla, Prince William, and Princess Beatrice, Anne and Edward became official representatives of the crown. The timing of the act's passage was significant. It came just 2 days before the release of the first volume of Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary. This timing highlighted a strategic shift within the monarchy, emphasizing Anne and Edward's new roles at a moment when the media was focused on Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties. By including Anne and Edward as counselors, the monarchy signaled their increased responsibilities and status. This role allows them to step in for King Charles III and represent the crown, both individually and together. Their appointment as official counselors was also a strategic response to the absence of Prince Harry, who likely would have been named a counselor alongside his brother had he remained a working royal. With Harry stepping back from royal duties, the need for additional senior figures to take on these responsibilities highlights how the royal family is adapting to ensure its continuity and effectiveness. On a more personal level, Princess Anne and Prince Edward share a unique bond that goes beyond their royal duties. Despite the significant age gap, Anne was a teenager when Edward was born. The two have always found common ground, especially when it comes to raising their children. Their older sister-younger brother dynamic is rooted in a classic family relationship, with Anne often taking on a protective and guiding role toward Edward. Over the years, this relationship has blossomed into one of mutual respect and alignment on several important issues, particularly when it comes to their children's upbringing. Anne and Edward have both made deliberate choices to shield their children from the intense public scrutiny that comes with being part of the royal family, in stark contrast to the more public lives led by their brothers' children, Prince Charles's and Prince Andrew's kids. Anne, who became a mother in 1977 with the birth of Peter Phillips, followed by Zara Tindall, née Phillips, in 1981, has always been clear about wanting to give her children as normal a life as possible. She declined titles for both Peter and Zara, allowing them to grow up without the added pressure and expectations that royal titles often bring. Anne has spoken openly about how every title comes with a downside, and her approach has allowed Peter and Zara to forge their own paths without the weight of royal protocol. Similarly, Prince Edward and his wife Sophie, Countess of Wessex, also made a conscious decision regarding their children's titles. They chose not to grant their children Lady Louise, born in 2003, and James, Viscount Severn, born in 2007, HRH titles. Sophie explained that this decision was made to prepare their children for a future where they might need to work for a living. By not using royal titles, they aim to give Louise and James a more grounded upbringing, with the option to adopt their titles when they turn 18, although Sophie believes that this is highly unlikely. This shared approach to parenting reflects a practical and modern take on royal life, with both Anne and Edward aiming to provide their children with a sense of normalcy that is rare in royal circles. Both siblings have been determined to give their children opportunities to experience life outside the royal bubble, encouraging independence and self-reliance. Anne's position further down the line of succession has also played a role in allowing her to keep her children's lives more private. As the second child of Queen Elizabeth II, she was never directly in line for the throne, which gave her more flexibility in how she raised her children. This freedom allowed Anne to focus on their personal development without the constant pressure of royal expectations. Edward, although closer to the throne than Anne, has embraced a similar philosophy, possibly influenced by Anne's example and their shared understanding of the pressures that come with royal titles. Together, they represent a shift within the royal family towards a more balanced approach to parenting, one that values personal growth and normality over tradition and titles. Meanwhile, a recent YouGov poll reaffirmed the popularity of Catherine, Princess of Wales, and William, Prince of Wales, as the most beloved members of the British royal family. This comes as no surprise, but it contrasts with the dynamics of royal engagements and public duties, where other royals, especially Princess Anne, have shown extraordinary dedication. Anne ranks fourth in popularity according to the YouGov poll, but when it comes to the number of royal engagements, she reigns supreme. In 2022, Anne was named the hardest-working royal by The Mirror, with a staggering 24 official engagements, including a significant visit to the United States, which highlighted her international role and relentless work ethic. King Charles III, who holds the fifth spot in popularity, was closely behind Anne in terms of royal engagements. He completed 181 official duties in 2022, a notable commitment considering his responsibilities grew substantially after his ascension to the throne following Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022. Prince Edward, even though he's not the most famous royal, still put in a serious effort when it came to his royal duties. In 2022, he completed around 140 official visits, making him the third busiest royal in terms of engagements. However, his hard work often gets overshadowed by his sister Anne, who is known for her incredible work ethic. When you compare their numbers, it's clear that Anne, along with Charles and Edward, plays a huge part in supporting the monarchy. While younger royals like William and Catherine might grab more of the limelight, it's Anne and her brothers who ensure the royal family's public service runs smoothly and stays strong. Anne's title of hardest-working royal isn't a one-off either. She's held that title in previous years like 2021, 2018, 2016, and 2015 too. It's proof of her unwavering commitment to her role, and it comes from her deep sense of duty to the crown and her charitable work. You might not know this, but Anne actually joined Edward for a special event back in 1969. As a teenager, she was already dealing with life in the public eye, taking on responsibilities that set her apart from her younger brother. Despite the age difference and their different royal duties, Anne and Edward shared some really sweet moments that showed just how close they were as siblings. One such moment from Edward's childhood was about something a lot of kids dream of: becoming an astronaut. The idea of space, the stars, and maybe even going to the moon is a fascination for many young minds. And Edward? He was no different, completely captivated by the idea of space exploration. Edward's childhood dream of becoming an astronaut took a thrilling turn when Colonel Frank Borman, the commander of Apollo 8, visited Buckingham Palace. This visit, which was a big deal for young Edward, brought his space fantasy to life in a way that few could ever imagine. Colonel Borman, a hero in space exploration for leading the first mission to orbit the moon, was an inspiration to many, and meeting him was a moment Edward would never forget. It was a rare opportunity to meet such an iconic figure in space history. Edward wasn't alone for the visit. His parents, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, were there too, highlighting just how important the occasion was. But it was Anne's involvement that made the moment even more special. As someone already familiar with public engagements and the duties of royalty, Anne joined in, sharing this meaningful experience with her younger brother. Photographs from the day show Anne smiling warmly as she watched Edward chat with Colonel Borman. It was a beautiful big sister moment where Anne could witness the pure joy and wonder in her little brother as he spoke to the astronaut, showing just how magical childhood moments can be, even for royals. The sibling bond didn't stop there. Edward and Anne also attended sporting events together, which helped bring them even closer. Princess Anne has always been a powerhouse when it comes to sports. Her skills as an equestrian led her to represent Great Britain at the 1976 Montreal Olympic Games, where she showcased her talent on a global stage. Her passion for horses and sports has defined her legacy, and she continues to play an influential role in the world of athletics. Today, she serves as the president of the British Olympic Association and is a member of the International Olympic Committee, cementing her place as one of the most remarkable royal athletes of all time. Anne is still very much involved in supporting sports and athletes today, and her love for equestrian sports started when she was young. Her passion reached its peak in 1976 when she competed in the Olympics, riding her horse Goodwill in the three-day eventing discipline. That moment was a huge achievement for Anne, showing off her skill and dedication in such a tough sport. It earned her respect not only as an athlete, but also helped build her credibility as a sports leader in later years. The dedication that Anne has for sports extends far beyond her own personal triumphs. She is the president of the British Olympic Association, and one of her primary responsibilities is to provide support for British athletes. She ensures that Team GB has the resources and support they require in order to compete successfully on the international arena. Additionally, she is a member of the International Olympic Committee, where she contributes to the formulation of policies and decisions that have an impact on athletes wherever in the globe. Her interest for sports was especially evident during the Olympic Games held in London in 2012, where she was frequently spotted in the stands cheering on Team GB and participating in a variety of ceremonial duties. Not only did her participation at the event demonstrate how committed she is to the sport, but it also demonstrated how much she cares about developing national pride. It is important to note that Anne's support is not limited to the Olympics. She is also a strong advocate for the Commonwealth Games, which is an international competition that brings together competitors from 54 different countries. In spite of the fact that they are not as large as the Olympic Games, the Commonwealth Games are extremely important to the royal family, and the 2022 competition was no exception. The fact that Anne and Prince Edward went to the Rugby Sevens competition together demonstrates the close relationship they have with one another as siblings and their mutual interest in sports. The Prince of Wales has established his own profession in the entertainment and arts industry, and he has even established a production company. This is despite the fact that he has not followed Anne's athletic route. However, despite the fact that they have different hobbies, Anne and Edward both like going to sporting events. The fact that they were able to spend time together at the 2022 Commonwealth Games demonstrated how significant their relationship is as siblings. They were joined by Edward's family, which included Sophie, Countess of Wessex, and their children, as well as by Anne's husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence. The royal family was captured on camera beaming and participating in the competition, thereby sharing a moment of happiness and support with one another. The close-knit relationship that exists within the royal family is beautifully captured in these instances, which demonstrate the extent to which they support one another, particularly when it comes to cheering on athletes competing in the Commonwealth. It is evident that athletics hold a significant place in their lives, but they have also been through challenging moments together, such as when they experienced the loss of their mother. When it comes to royal duties, Princess Anne is recognized for her stiff upper lip attitude and her no-nonsense approach. She has always been the epitome of fortitude and determination. People have a tendency to view her as someone who approaches situations with a businesslike demeanor, and she rarely displays any signs of vulnerability. On the other hand, when Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September of 2022, a different and more emotional side of Anne was brought to light. As the period of grieving progressed, it became abundantly clear that Anne was profoundly affected by the death of her biological mother. This time, her loss was palpable, and she fought to maintain the stoic image that was required of her. Normally, she is able to retain a controlled exterior, but this time her grief was real. In the photographs taken during this time period, Anne's normally strong demeanor became more fragile, and it was quite distressing to observe her obviously struggling with her feelings. Given that Anne was the only daughter of the Queen and the second eldest child of the Queen, her loss was deeply personal, and it was evident how profoundly it affected her. You could see the human side of Anne, which is the part that is rarely presented to the public, despite the fact that she was making an attempt to keep her calm. When Anne was going through this difficult time, it was Prince Edward, the youngest of Queen Elizabeth's children, and the one who was frequently referred to as the baby of the family, who showed up to provide her comfort. The affection that the two shared, which was typically concealed from public view, turned out to be a poignant and heartfelt sight for everyone to watch. Judy James, an expert in body language, observed their interactions and made the observation that it was quite unusual to witness such a public display of affection between siblings. Additionally, Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, was observed extending her support to Anne by making a gesture that was uncomplicated but profound. She placed her hand on Anne's shoulder. This was a tremendous display of compassion and solidarity, and it demonstrated how deeply the family cared for each other throughout their time of grief. This was a royal standard of affection and unity. The fact that Edward and Sophie were among the most distraught mourners at the funeral was brought to James's attention. At the service, Sophie could be seen actively blotting her tears, demonstrating her care for Anne. During this period of mourning, the deep familial relationship that is typically kept hidden became more apparent as a result of their shared sadness and the support that they gave to one another. After Queen Elizabeth II passed away, the royal family entered what is known as the Year of Firsts, which is characterized by important emotional milestones as they confronted life without the Queen. They experienced significant events and customs for the first time without her presence. For the people of the United Kingdom, the passing of the Queen was a significant national loss. Yet, for the members of the royal family, it was very personal. Throughout the course of the year, they were confronted with the problem of adjusting to this new reality, while simultaneously continuing to fulfill their royal duties and customs. The holiday season of 2022 was very painful for them because it was the first Christmas that they had celebrated without the Queen. Sandringham, a spot that is filled with holiday memories, was the location where the family gathered. King Charles III and Camilla hosted the festivities, which marked a huge transition as Charles accepted his new role as monarch. In the same way that they had been during the funeral of the Queen, Princess Anne and Prince Edward were present and providing support to one another. The first Christmas broadcast that monarch Charles III saw as monarch, which is a much-loved royal custom, was one of the most significant moments that occurred during this time period. The members of the royal family gathered together to watch, and the changeover from Queen Elizabeth's broadcast to Charles's message was a momentous occasion that signaled the beginning of a new era for the monarchy. The notion behind the Year of Firsts was to uphold long-standing customs while also paving the way for new ways of doing things. One of the traditions that continued to be practiced was the giving and receiving of joke gifts on Christmas Eve. This brought a sense of humor to the otherwise solemn mood. The family kept their tradition of walking together to the local church in Norfolk on Christmas Day, which served as a public demonstration of their ability to remain united and consistent. When it comes to the relationship between Princess Anne and Prince Edward, it is abundantly evident that they have a relationship that is both strong and supportive. During the time that they were in sorrow, they showed an aspect of their relationship that is rarely shown in public by leaning on each other emotionally. The link between them is one of profound empathy and trust, and they assist each other in both their personal and royal responsibilities. This is true despite the fact that they play different positions within the family. A great illustration of the power of family relationships, particularly in times of loss and transition. This is a wonderful example.